Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and the P5+1 for being here today. You're required to come to a consensus regarding how to handle Iran and their nuclear program. As the deadline for the temporary deal in place approaches, we must have a plan of action if in case a long-term agreement cannot be reached before the July 20th deadline. Initially, the International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, traces Iran's nuclear ambitions back as far as 1984. Since then, Iran has felt as though it needs to acquire nuclear weapons to protect themselves and bolster their position in the region. In the early 2000s, Iran covertly purchased special gases from the Chinese that could potentially be used to enrich uranium to a weapons-grade material. It was at this point that secret nuclear facilities had also been discovered and Iran's motives were called into question. Since 2005, many proposals have been negotiated between Iran and major stakeholders to reach a long-term comprehensive agreement as to what needs to be done with the program. Those proposals often included a commitment not to pursue weapons of mass destruction, greater transparency, sanction relief, further inspections, and other important areas of the conversation. The current status of the issue continues to generate cause for concern. As many have feared, including Israel, Iran is rapidly approaching what is being referred to as a red line. This red line is believed to be the point of no return, when Iran can combine their stockpiles of high and low-grade enriched uranium to develop a nuclear weapon. Additionally, Iran has been developed a plutonium-breeding heavy water reactor in the city of Arak, which could produce up to 2 bombs per year in the near future. However, there are many options available to handle this situation. Firstly, the United States and the P5+1 could continue on with interim agreements like they are now until a more permanent solution can be reached. This way, it can be claimed that negotiations are still open and progress is being made towards a long-term agreement. Secondly, we could revert back to the old status quo, which involves heavy sanctions, no long-term agreement, and implementing red lines. These red lines would include seizing their stockpiles of uranium enriched at 20% and not being able to enrich in the future above 3.5%. If it appeared that Iran was attempting to construct a bomb, they would have crossed a red line and subjected themselves to further sanctions. Thirdly, a long-term agreement could be reached that leads to a peaceful Iran, one that receives investment from the rest of the world in education, infrastructure, and so forth. It will require, however, that they forfeit their stockpiles of uranium and never enrich beyond 3.5% in the future. They would also be required to shut down their facility at Natanz and Fordow. In return, the P5+1 could provide Iran diplomatic, financial, and engineering support in developing a truly peaceful civilian nuclear power program. Fourthly, a strategic military strike could be orchestrated to destroy key facilities involved in the nuclear development process. A strike such as this would include the enrichment facilities at Fordow and Natanz and the heavy water reactor currently under construction at Arak, since these are the critical elements on the path to Iran obtaining a nuclear weapon. Such focused attacks would also prevent excessive collateral damage. Lastly, the United States and the rest of the P5+1 could do nothing and learn to deal with the nuclear-armed Iran. This could be accomplished by simply getting out of their way and letting them do whatever it is they're going to do. In a case such as this, the P5+1 would take the same approach to Iran as the rest of the world that possesses nuclear weapons, and that's the threat of retaliation. These options are deemed as the most reasonable and appropriate at the current time. Based off of all the available options, I would recommend that if and when the temporary agreement ends, the P5+1 actively impose heavy sanctions back onto Iran. While the sanctions are in place, I would continually encourage the Iranians to sit down at the table and hammer out a deal that works for everyone. This deal would have to include all of the criteria that were involved with a long-term deal. Having said that, it would require that they forfeit their stockpiles of uranium and never enrich beyond 3.5% in the future. Also, they would be required to shut down their facilities at Natanz and Fordow. In return, the P5+1 could provide Iran the support and investments that were previously discussed. While I would continue to advocate for a long-term resolution, I would also be planning a strategic military strike that could be used as an alternative action or last resort. This military action would destroy the previously defined locations named Fordo, Natanz, and Eric. I would also establish red lines with the rest of the decision makers. If Iran goes back to enriching uranium above 3.5%, attempts to construct a heavy water bomb, combines their 20% and 3.5% uranium, or develops additional secret facilities, I would be prepared to operate the orchestrated military strike. Furthermore, I believe that you, the decision makers, should exercise every ounce of ability in your possession to reach a long-term, comprehensive, peaceful resolution to the problem. However, I do not see anything calming or peaceful about an Iran that has nuclear weapons at their disposal. That's why I believe there's no possible way we can let them have them. One North Korea is enough in the world. We do not need another like it, especially in a region that's already overwhelmed with radical Islamists and perpetual conflict. Also, if Iran is left unchecked, other states in the region will try to obtain weapons of mass destruction as well. In a political sense, the fast track to reducing the number of weapons of mass destruction in the world is not to allow more to be created. In a technical sense, we have everything we need. We have everything we need to make a deal happen. We have leverage, power, influence, military strength. If we continue to push for a deal to be made down the road, it may actually manifest itself. If not, we're more than equipped to stop them. In conclusion, how this situation plays out will determine the future stability of the region. However, preventing a nuclear-armed Iran can avert significant future carnage and conflict. Pushing for a long-term deal that converts their nuclear program through a peaceful transition with sanctions and military action as a backup could be a good way to start. Thank you very much for taking the time, and I wish you the best of luck with your decision.